In part one, we met MacArthur Wheeler, the man who robbed banks wearing lemon juice. His story gave us the Dunning-Kruger Effect, the documented phenomenon in which the least competent people in a domain are simultaneously the most confident, and the least able to recognize their own incompetence. But first, what happens when this peak isn't personal? What happens when it goes public? Today, in part two, we take the Dunning-Kruger effect out of the laboratory and into the world, where overconfident reasoning about vaccines, COVID, and conspiracy theories has not just personal, but measurable societal consequences. Let us begin where the evidence is clearest and the consequences most measurable. In 2018, researchers Matthew Motta, Timothy Callaghan, and Sylvester published a landmark study in Social Science and Medicine that has become one of the most cited pieces of Dunning-Kruger research in the public health literature. They surveyed 1,310 American adults, measuring their objective knowledge about the causes of autism, the specific domain where vaccine misinformation is concentrated, and then measuring how knowledgeable participants believed themselves to be relative to medical doctors and scientists. The result was precise and alarming. More than a third of respondents, 36%, believed they knew as much as or more than medical doctors about the causes of autism. 34% believed they knew as much as or more than scientists. And the overconfidence was highest among precisely those with the lowest objective knowledge scores. But here is the public health dimension that makes this more than an academic finding. The overconfidence was the primary driver of vaccine opposition. The consequences are documented and measurable. The United States declared measles eliminated in the year 2000. By 2019, measles outbreaks had returned, driven by communities where confidence had systematically outpaced knowledge. The pandemic of 2020 produced what researchers described as a simultaneous outbreak of a second contagion, epistemic overconfidence. Virtually overnight, millions of people with no training in virology began confidently diagnosing the virus, evaluating the efficacy of experimental treatments, interpreting statistical models, and dismissing the conclusions of career scientists. Research published by Pennycook and Rand in 2021 found susceptibility was predicted by low analytical thinking. People who scored lower on the cognitive reflection test, a validated measure of analytical versus intuitive thinking, were significantly more likely to accept false claims about COVID, regardless of their political affiliation. The Dunning-Kruger dimension is precise. The less equipped someone was to evaluate epidemiological claims, the more confidently they made them. The peak of the curve was crowded during those 2 years with direct consequences for public health. There is a specific mechanism within the Dunning-Kruger effect that deserves its own name, and researchers Philip Fernbach and Stephen Sloman gave it one in 2013. They called it the illusion of explanatory depth. The gap between believing you can explain something and actually being able to do so in enough detail to satisfy a skeptic. In their research, they asked participants to rate their understanding of complex policy issues, including cap and trade and nuclear power, and then asked them to actually explain the mechanisms in detail. Confidence collapsed. Participants struggled to produce coherent explanations at even a basic level. And critically, once their confidence collapsed, their policy positions moderated. Extremism softened when confronted with the limits of actual understanding. The most confident opinions are often the least grounded ones. This finding is worth sitting with. It means that a significant portion of the most confident political opinions in circulation are not conclusions reached through understanding. They are conclusions reached in the absence of it. In a landmark meta-analysis published in 2023, researchers synthesized 170 studies and over 150,000 participants to identify the strongest psychological correlates of conspiratorial thinking. The results were telling. The 3 strongest correlates identified were perceiving danger and threat, relying on intuition rather than analysis, and, most relevant, being antagonistic and acting superior. That third correlate is the Dunning-Kruger effect operating as an identity. Conspiracy thinking is structured around overconfidence. The entire framework is built on the premise that members possess knowledge that experts and the general public cannot access. QAnon is the defining modern case study. Its framework explicitly framed members as superior critical thinkers. The phrase, "do your own research," was not an invitation to genuine inquiry. It was a signal of arrival at the peak of inflated self-confidence. And here is what makes this most dangerous. The overconfidence is self-sealing. Correction is not received as new information. It is received as evidence of the corrector's corruption. Each piece of counter-evidence confirms the conspiracy. All four of these case studies share a common amplifier. Social media does not just distribute these patterns, it breeds them. Platform algorithms reward confident assertion over carefully qualified accuracy. A definitive wrong claim expressed with certainty generates more engagement. This means the information environment is systematically populated by voices at the peak, and systematically filters out calibrated voices in the valley. The Dunning-Kruger effect in the individual dimension is a story about the predictable consequences of a gap between knowledge and self-awareness, a gap that social media is systematically widening. In Part 3, we take this into the most sensitive territory, the civic and political dimension. As you know, this channel exists for one reason: your self-empowerment, free of political or religious dogma and free of charge, always. Democracy runs on arguments, both bad and good. We all benefit when the quality rises. If these videos move that needle even slightly, please like and share. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, I'm John Bala. Think critically and choose wisely.